So let's talk about trauma bonds and understanding what that is. And the best way to understand, right, is usually through hearing a story. So I'm going to tell you about two people named Emily and Sarah. And they had known each other since childhood. And their friendship was different because it was entangled in what we call trauma bonding, right? So Emily and Sarah had grown up in households where they both experienced neglect and emotional abuse. So Emily's parents were kind of distant and didn't really acknowledge that she had any feelings. And Sarah's home was filled with constant arguments and tension. So, despite the two of them having like this painful background, they really found safety and comfort with each other. So, as they entered adulthood, their bond became even stronger because now they have all this history, right? So, Emily and Sarah learned to lean on each other for emotional support, and they believed that their friendship was a lifeline in this world. And what they weren't seeing was the dark side to their friendship. And that's where the trauma bonding comes in. So here's some examples actually of what trauma bonding looks like in a relationship. So shared pain is one of the first things. And Emily and Sarah had both endured emotional pain from their families. And instead of seeking healthier relationships, they held on to the relationship that they had with each other and constantly discussed their past traumas, which reinforced that pain that they shared. Okay. Then they both also had a fear of abandonment. So, having that intense fear due to their childhood experiences, they were also deeply afraid of losing each other because they were each other's person. That was the person who seemed to understand their suffering. And that is one of the things that kept them bound together was that fear of abandonment, a fear of being alone, of losing each other. Then there's the cycle of toxicity. And Emily and Sarah, their friendship had become toxic, as most friendships do, or relationships when there's trauma bonding, right? So they frequently engaged in arguments with each other, and the fear of abandonment and loneliness always brought them back together. And it became this perpetuating cycle of having a falling out and reconciliation, causing each other pain and becoming friends again. That leads to an unhealthy dependency, right? They both became so overly dependent on each other for emotional support and validation. So Emily couldn't make decisions without Sarah's approval, and Sarah felt lost without constant reassurance from Emily. Then there is the final part, which is the inability to break free. So, despite the pain that they were causing each other, Emily and Sarah could not imagine a life without each other. Their trauma bonding had created like this invisible chain, this link that kept them trapped in a dysfunctional relationship. So eventually, one of them went to therapy, and through therapy and self reflection, Emily and Sarah began to recognize how toxic their relationship was. And they understood how the trauma bonding was holding them back from finding healthier, more fulfilling relationships. So, in this case, they made the decision to each seek individual therapy and slowly distance themselves from each other. It was a painful process. Um, there's a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, but they both knew that essentially that is what they had to do for their own personal growth and well-being. So their story serves as a really powerful example of how trauma bonding works, and it shows how past traumas can bind two people together in really unhealthy ways. And that bond, as much as it feels safe and secure, it's because it's a repeating of the past, of the painful things. And that can keep you from really from like breaking free and actually healing. So if you find that in your relationships, you're constantly rehashing things um, that you've been through, or you sit around saying, remember the time when this horrible thing happened, it might be time to do some self-reflection and really start to expand into relationships that don't include constantly recalling or retelling of the ways that you've suffered. Okay, save that for therapy.